Hi, I'm James Shillinglaw. I'm here at ILTM North America in Mayakoba, Mexico, and I'm here with Robert Keaty, who is the Regional Manager North America for Tourism Western Australia. And he's a long way from his destination, but he's over here to talk with all the luxury travel advisors at ILTM, and we're going to find out exactly what he told them and what's going on in Western Australia. As you know, right now, you can't really go to Australia, but hopefully by next year. But we're going to find out what they've been up to there and a whole lot more on Insider Travel Report. Robert, first of all, great to see you live. It's nice that we're actually here, right?
It is absolutely amazing to be at another live event. It's been a long time, and 2 years for ILTM.
Absolutely, and I was here 2 years ago, and actually been here for the last 9 years. So next year we have to come back for my 10th, so we'll see what happens. Now, tell us a little bit about Western Australia. First of all, where is it aside from being in the West, right?
Yeah, it is, in fact, the western part of the continent of Australia. It's a third of the entire country, one state. So it's a pretty large, vast area. Perth is the gateway city. You do have to, from North America, fly into one of our gateway cities on either Brisbane, Melbourne, or Sydney, and then make your way over to Perth.
Okay, so yeah, and I've actually been in Australia a couple of times, but never made my way over to Perth. So one of these days I got to make it over there. Now, as I mentioned before, now what is the status of travel to Australia? At this point, Americans just can't go, right?
Absolutely correct. Unfortunately, the borders are closed. There is a sense that we're looking at probably July of 22 at this point. I mean, that's the official word from the government. Federal government has put out a 4-point plan, which is largely based on vaccination rates. That will be the determining factor, frankly, in opening up to international travel. We're hoping it's going to happen before July. The vaccination rates have started to increase, and they are doing a great job at getting those vaccinations out. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, well, let's hope it's even sooner than July, if it can be that way. But well, the rest of the world seems to be opening, and I'm eager to get back to Australia, that's for sure, and New Zealand, and of course you represent them, but you haven't been able to go either, right?
No, absolutely, yeah. I started this job with Tourism Western Australia in February, and unfortunately haven't been able to get over there since I started the job. I've been to Australia 23, 24 times, so it's not unfamiliar to me, but I am anxious to get back there.
Yeah, and so am I. I was there a couple of years ago. Now, why is Western Australia a destination that Americans should visit? What are some of the things they can do there, and what are the attractions?
There are many. I would say to you that Western Australia probably has a number of experiences in Australia that you can't actually do anywhere else in Australia. Okay. Swimming with whale sharks. I
do that all the time. I don't know about you.
No, I've done it a couple of times in Western Australia, but it is the only place in Australia. Right. Look, it's a unique destination within Australia. There's no question. I mean, Australia has a lot of uniqueness to it as a continent, but Western Australia has it in spades.
So it is a lot of unique experiences you can get there. I know Perth is a wonderful city, but you got to get out beyond and out. As you said, it's if the largest state territory in Australia, right?
Yep, absolutely largest state. Yeah, no question. And I mean, Western Australia is a year-round destination. That's the beauty of it. The size, particularly from the north-south, allows for different climates from the north to the south, and it is a year-round destination. The season in the north in the Kimberley is very different than the season in the south around Perth and around the southwest, for example.
Yeah, and that's the thing you got your arms around is that you have Perth, but you also got the Kimberleys in the north, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The Kimberley in the north, the Coral Coast, where you're swimming with the whale sharks. I mean, there are 2 reefs in Australia, not just the one on the east coast. We have the Ningaloo Reef, which is actually the longest fringing reef on the west coast of the Exmouth Peninsula. And that's where you're swimming with whale sharks. It's a beautiful reef. You can literally put your gear on the beach, and within 60 meters, 100 meters, you're swimming with turtles turtles and on the coral.
Well, that sounds amazing, and a very good reason to go. Now, what has Western Australia been up to during the pandemic? I mean, I guess you've been kind of retooling a little, putting in new stuff, new hotels, new attractions. I understand, for example, and I don't want to go in depth into it, but there's even something like it's called a new Kalbarri Skywalk, which is on the Coral Coast in Kalbarri National Park. Well, first of all, tell us about that national park a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, there is not brand new, but yes, there's that, and there are many things that have been retooled and improved. Look, Western Australia has done extremely well through the pandemic from a domestic tourism perspective. It's a destination that a lot of Australians want to go to, and because they're unable to go anywhere outside of the country, it has really been a boon for us in terms of Eastern Australians, for example, coming to the West. Some of the seasons up in the Kimberley around the Coral Coast have been very good. So the good news for international travelers is that when those borders do reopen, you're going to find that the infrastructure, the tourism infrastructure, and the product that's available there has a very strong base because it's been supported by the domestic tourism market. So we're really buoyed by that and by the fact that there's new development of product for the domestic market, which a lot of those operators are now looking at from an international perspective and looking to repurpose that for the international market. So there's a lot of that going on.
Yeah, I understand there's like a 428 million Australian museum that is really focused on the story of the Aboriginal people that's in Perth, right?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's just an amazing facility. And beyond that, I mean, Western Australia has over 50 fully operated, owned, and guided by Aboriginal nations within Western Australia throughout the state. Many of these Aboriginal experiences are not necessarily out in the rural areas. I mean, for example, you can do an Aboriginal tour of Kings Park in Perth, and you can do a city tour of Broome, but you can also go fly fishing with Brian Lee up in Cooljamin on the north side of Cape Leveque on the Dampier Peninsula. So, I mean, there's just a lot going on in that space. And I think Western Australia has really developed the Aboriginal tourism offerings and continues to do so. There is a government paper that's been produced which has a number of recommendations in terms of developing even more in this Aboriginal space for Western Australia. And it's important to have that authentic experience when you're in the state, because those are the things that set us apart. Those are the things that you can do there that you can't do anywhere else.
Yeah, and in fact, when I was there a few years ago, there was a lot of emphasis on Aboriginal experiences. They really are focused, and businesses that are run by the Aboriginal people that, like as you said, they're guides and tour operators and, destination management companies that do offer all these things. Or you can do something like, simple. There's a new zip line, which I think is a place called I got to read this because Matagara Bridge, which is 1,300 feet across the Swan River, just opened this year in Perth. That sounds pretty high, actually.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. There's been a couple of those new experiences developed within the city limits. You can actually skydive now right into the center of the city.
A lot of height involved in these attractions.
A few of them. Well, you see, we've got a lot of wide open space, so it's good for you to be able to get a good sense of the size of Western Australia from
high above. Yeah, well, it sounds like it's going to be pretty high above. Now, another thing, there's I understand there's something called a Chidna Walkabout in partnership with Exmouth Dive and Whale Sharks, and set to launch a new conservation tour in Exmouth, which again on the Coral Coast, right?
Yeah, absolutely, Echidna Walkabout and Exmouth Dive. Those are companies that have gotten together under a brand that is creating tours in the conservation space, in the sustainability space. There's a lot going on in that space in Western Australia and in Australia at large. It's extremely important. Obviously, it's something that is a tourism driver going forward for people, and I think even coming out of the pandemic is becoming more and more important, frankly. And there are areas, there are tours like this one that are being created. Also in accommodation, where you've got eco tent glamping products, for example, Salsalis on the Exmouth Peninsula, which is also done and created in a very sustainable way, and trying to essentially eliminate and become a neutral carbon offset. And it's
that's a very big thing. I think this week is actually, we're talking, and there's a lot of focus on net zero and carbon and sustainable tourism. And as we emerge from the pandemic, we seem to be trying to be emerging more sustainable fashion, which is great.
Yeah, no, that's that's absolutely true. And I mean, that exists in many of the products in many of the areas within the state. Again, Tourism Western Australia, from a government perspective, is taking a lead in that, and is supporting a lot of our tourism businesses within the state. It's really important. I mean, we have to do this. I mean, there's no question.
No, and both in Australia and here. And then, of course, I got to talk to a little bit about new places to stay. And to tell us a little about some of those, there's a place that I'm here is called Samphire Rottnest, which I don't know about the second name, but it sounds interesting. What exactly is that?
Well, Samphire, well, we have to bring up Rottnest Island, obviously. Rottnest Island is an island that sits just off the coast of Perth. It is home to the happiest animal in the world, which is our quokka, which is indigenous to that area.
What kind of animal is that?
It's a small, furry, wonderful little animal that runs around Rottnest Island. If you actually do a Google on hashtag quokka selfie, you'll find hundreds and thousands of selfies that are taken on Rottnest Island. And Samphire is a new accommodation option. Actually, there's been a great deal of development on the island around Aboriginal experiences again, as well as sustainable accommodation options. It's always been the case that Rottnest has been more of a day trip destination, and we're
you can stay there.
Really put that in perspective and be able to get out there for a day or a night or 2 nights and turn it into a much better. The beaches are beautiful. It's a cycling. You can cycle around the island. It's a great spot.
Any other new places to stay? Things that agents can sell out there?
Well, I always sort of, eliminate the 1-year pandemic year. So prior to that, we had a number of new accommodation offerings open up. Ritz-Carlton is probably the newest one in Perth, which is of note. But there's also been a number of other hotels and accommodation locations that have done a lot of refurbishments during this time.
Time to do it?
They've used this time to their benefit, absolutely. I think the accommodation offerings throughout Western Australia are top notch. I mean, we have luxury lodges both in the north and the south. Cape Lodge around Margaret River. And we haven't even talked about Margaret River and the wine region.
Yeah, well, Margaret River is a very, very famous, and that's something we really should talk about. Margaret River is ready and waiting for Americans to come back.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the Margaret River is a brilliant area. Wineries and culinary offerings down there. Also, one thing you may not know is that it's the 4th largest producer of truffles in the world. Which is something that maybe you didn't know.
So it's not just the French, right?
It's not, no. There's a big festival there each year celebrating that called the Truffle Kerfuffle, which is a celebration of all things truffle around food.
The same dogs or sometimes pigs that go get them as well?
Yep, dogs.
I've seen that happen in France before, so I'd be kind of curious. Now you're here at ILTM North America, which is really focused on luxury travel, and you're talking to luxury travel advisors here. Why is Western Australia really a luxury destination?
Well, I guess it depends on how you define and how everyone defines luxury, because everyone defines it in many different ways. From our perspective, we kind of use the tagline where luxury meets adventure. Mm-hmm. We do have a number of luxury lodges throughout the state. We've got some very high-end products, a lot of private touring. A lot of air and helicopter experiences. I mean, you're getting into very remote areas in the West Kimberley, for example, in the East Kimberley around the Bungle Bungle mountain ranges. I mean, it's not necessarily the same luxury that you might define it as in other destinations, but this is where you are really finding yourself in your sense of place.
Right.
And it's that place that makes it special. And it's the food and the wine and the culinary offerings around all of that. That's the one thing about Australia. I mean, the food offerings are unbelievable. I mean, it doesn't matter whether you're in the finest restaurant in Perth, or you're in Salsalis, or you're in one of the luxury lodges in El Questro up in the Kimberley. You are getting an experience that is based on fresh ingredients, farm to table, with ethnic and Aboriginal influences that you just don't get anywhere else.
No, it's a great combination. And you said two key things earlier, wine and truffles. Right away, we're getting into luxury travel territory, I think, right?
Exactly. Yep. No question about that. Yeah.
Now,
100%.
where can travel advisors go to get more information about Western Australia in particular?
I think the best place to start would be on the consumer site, which is westernaustralia.com. And certainly getting a hold of me at robert.keddy@westernaustralia.com is also a great resource. I'm based here in the U.S. in California, and absolutely happy to help any North American advisor navigate selling Western Australia.
That's great news, and of course we're both eager to get back to Western Australia. Me for the first time, you for multiple times, and you can go back and see what's happening. So let's hope it opens up certainly by July next year, and maybe earlier. We'll see what happens.
Fingers crossed it's earlier. Yeah.
Fingers crossed it's early. Well, Robert, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us about Western Australia and sort of the luxury angle and also the adventure angle here.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, James. Appreciate it.
I'm James Shillinglaw, and this is Insider Travel Report.